My name is Jack, and I've been married to Sarah for almost 5 years now. We've got a good thing going. She's got this light in her that always makes things better. She works as an event planner, and she's great at it. Every party, every wedding she touches turns into something unforgettable. I guess you could say she's got a knack for making moments count. Me? I'm in finance, pretty straightforward stuff. Numbers, deals, and meetings. My job's solid, but it's not exactly the most thrilling thing in the world. Sarah, though, she's got this whole crew of friends she spends a lot of time with. They've been close since college, and somehow they've stayed tight over the years. It's funny watching them together. It's like they're still those same carefree college girls, even though they've all got careers and responsibilities now. There's Katie, who's a graphic designer, Emma, a high-powered lawyer, and Rachel, who's in marketing. They all have their different vibes, but when they're together, it's just pure energy. You'd think they were planning world domination the way they get excited over everything. When the four of them get together, it's like watching a well-oiled machine. They talk over each other, finish each other's sentences, and somehow still manage to make plans that no one ever really understands until they happen. Sarah calls it her support system, but honestly, it's more like her own personal girl gang. They have inside jokes that go back years, and no matter how much time they spend apart, when they're together, it's like no time has passed. They've got this bond that's both a little intimidating and kind of inspiring. As for me, I'm more of a laid-back guy. I've got my hobbies, golf being the main one, and I'm content keeping things simple. But when Sarah and her friends are planning something, I know it's only a matter of time before I get roped into some scheme or another. Sometimes it's brunches, other times it's weekend getaways. Whatever it is, it's always something they're completely obsessed with for a while. What's interesting about Sarah's friends is how different they all are. Katie's the artsy one, Emma's the serious, no-nonsense type, and Rachel's got this wild side that keeps everyone on their toes. Sarah's somewhere in the middle, the one who can bring them all together. They balance each other out in this weird way that somehow just works. They're all driven, successful, and independent, but when they're together, it's like they're 20 years old again, trying to figure out life. You might think this sounds pretty ordinary, just a group of close-knit women living their lives, but trust me, what's coming next is something none of us could have ever predicted. You won't believe it when I tell you, but things are about to get strange. Don't forget to like and subscribe. One evening, Sarah and I were winding down after a long day, just the two of us on the couch. She seemed a bit off, not her usual upbeat self. Finally, she turned to me and said, "You know, I feel like I'm stuck in this routine. Work, home, hang out with the girls sometimes, but nothing else. It's kind of boring." You know, I could see where she was coming from. Sarah thrives on excitement and creativity. And lately, things had been a bit predictable. She continued, "You've got golf. You're out there with your friends, doing your thing. And I love that for you. But I just don't get it. The idea of chasing a ball around a field for hours. Not for me." She laughed a little, but I could tell she was serious. Katie, Emma, Rachel, and I were talking the other day, and we all kind of feel the same way. We need something fun, something to shake things up. I nodded, listening to her. I hadn't really thought about it, but it made sense. Sarah wasn't the type to just sit around. She needed a project, a hobby, something to get excited about. "So, what are you thinking?" I asked, curious. "What kind of thing do you and the girls want to get into? Maybe a book club or yoga or something like that?" She sighed. "That's the problem. We don't know. We've thrown around a few ideas, but nothing's really clicking. We don't want anything too serious or boring, but it has to be something we can all do together." She leaned back on the couch, clearly frustrated. "I don't know, I just want something that feels different, you know? Something that's our own." I thought for a moment and then said, "Well, how about this? I'll keep an ear out, see if I can come up with any ideas for you. In the meantime, you and the girls keep brainstorming. There's got to be something out there that's fun, challenging, and right up your alley." Sarah smiled at that, appreciating the support. "Thanks," she said. "I knew you'd understand. We just need to find the right thing. And once we do, I think it'll make a huge difference." I hate feeling like I'm just going through the motions. I gave her a reassuring nod, and as she rested her head on my shoulder, I started thinking about what kind of hobby could really spark that excitement she was craving. Whatever it was, I knew we'd find it. A week went by, and Sarah still seemed restless. One night, while we were having dinner, she brought it up again. "We've been brainstorming, but nothing really feels right. Katie suggested we try pottery, but Emma said she'd rather stick needles in her eyes than do that. Rachel wanted us to try dance classes, but honestly, I can't imagine all of us trying to stay in sync. It's frustrating. We just want something we can all enjoy, but nothing's clicking." I could see how much this was bugging her. She wasn't the type to let things go easily, especially when it came to finding something fun and meaningful. "It's harder than I thought," she said with a sigh. "I want something exciting, something that makes me feel alive, but it also has to be something we all enjoy." That's when a thought hit me. I remembered that my mom used to be really into horseback riding when I was a kid. She'd go every weekend, rain or shine, and it always seemed to give her so much joy and freedom. It wasn't just about riding the horse, it was about being outside, connecting with the animal, feeling that rush. Maybe that's what Sarah and her friends needed, something different, something out of the ordinary. I turned to Sarah and, half-jokingly, said, "Hey, have you ever thought about horseback riding? My mom used to do it, and she loved it. Maybe you can give it a try. You know, riding something other than in bed." I shot her a cheeky grin, hoping to lighten the mood. Sarah rolled her eyes but laughed. "Very funny, Jack," she said, "but you know, that's actually not a bad idea." She started to think about it, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Horseback riding. I mean, it's active, it's outdoors, and it's definitely something different. I bet the girls would be into it. She pulled out her phone and immediately texted her group chat. "Let me see what they think." It didn't take long for the responses to come flooding in. "Katie's in. Emma thinks it sounds fun. And Rachel, well, she's already looking up stables near us." Sarah looked up from her phone, excited for the first time in days. "I think this might actually be it," she said, her face lighting up. I couldn't help but smile, feeling pretty proud of myself for coming up with the idea. "Glad to be of service," I said. "Looks like you're about to be the next horse whisperer." Sarah leaned over and gave me a quick kiss. "We'll see about that, but for now, this is the most excited I've been about anything in a while." About a month had passed since Sarah and her friends started horseback riding, and to my surprise, they were all completely hooked. Every 4 days, without fail, they'd head off to the stables, rain or shine. At first, I thought it was just another phase, something they'd get into for a couple of weeks, and then move on from. Like that yoga class they tried last year. But this was different. They were all obsessed, and none of them had missed a single session. It was like they had found their new passion. The guys and I started to notice how into it our wives were. We usually met up for a round of golf every weekend, just to unwind and catch up. One Saturday, as we were getting ready to tee off, I brought it up. "Anyone else notice how the girls are all in on this horseback riding thing?" I asked. The others nodded. Mark, Emma's husband, said, "Yeah. Emma hasn't stopped talking about it. I've never seen her this dedicated to anything outside of work." We were all a bit surprised. Rachel's husband, Dave, laughed and said, "It's wild. Rachel's always been a bit unpredictable, but I didn't think she'd stick to this 4 days a week, no matter what." I asked her the other day if she wanted to skip and just relax at home, and she looked at me like I'd suggested robbing a bank. As we moved through the course, we couldn't help but keep talking about it. It wasn't just that our wives were into it. They were really into it. It had become their thing, something they couldn't seem to get enough of. We were happy for them, of course, but also a bit curious. What was it about horseback riding that had them so hooked? It wasn't like they were training for the Olympics or anything. It was just supposed to be a hobby. "I've got to admit, I didn't expect Sarah to stick with it," I said. "She loves trying new things. But this level of commitment, it's impressive." The others agreed. We were all supportive, of course, but there was this shared sense of amazement at how much horseback riding had taken over their schedules and conversations. By the end of our game, we had pretty much come to the same conclusion. Whatever it was about horseback riding, it had clearly struck a chord with our wives. None of us had seen them this enthusiastic about anything in a long time. "Guess we should just be glad they found something they love," Mark said as we headed to the clubhouse. "Still, it's strange how into it they are. It's like they're in some kind of riding cult." We all laughed, but there was definitely a lingering curiosity among us. What was it about those stables that had them so captivated? The following weekend, during our usual golf game, the conversation naturally turned back to the girls and their horseback riding obsession. We were halfway through the course when Dave suddenly said, "You know, we should go check it out one of these days. See what all the fuss is about." He had this playful grin on his face, clearly joking, but it got the rest of us thinking. Mark laughed and replied, "What, you want to trade your golf clubs for a saddle? I can't see any of us turning into horse guys, man." We all chuckled, but Dave shrugged and said, "Hey, never say never. If they love it this much, there's got to be something to it, right? Maybe we're missing out." At first I thought he was just messing around, but as we played on, the idea didn't seem so ridiculous. "What if we went with them one day?" I suggested, still unsure if I was serious. "I mean, just to see what's going on. We can check it out, maybe understand why they're all so hooked." The others started nodding in agreement, curiosity clearly getting the better of us. Mark raised an eyebrow, half smiling. "You think they'd let us?" "I'm pretty sure Emma's been keeping it as her little escape from me. Every time I ask her about it, she gets all vague, like it's some big secret." That got us all thinking. The more we talked, the more we realized our wives weren't exactly forthcoming with details. They loved it. That much was clear. But beyond that, not a whole lot of information. "I'm with Mark on this one," Dave said. "Rachel's the same way. I ask her how the session went, and she just says it was great and changes the subject. It's weird, right? Maybe we should see for ourselves." He was only half joking now, and we could all sense it. By the time we finished the game, we had pretty much decided we were going to try to tag along one day, just to check it out. Let's talk to the girls, see if they're cool with us coming along, I suggested. If nothing else, we'll get to spend some time with them, see what's been keeping them so busy. Who knows, maybe we'll all end up riding horses ourselves. We all laughed, but deep down, we were genuinely curious about what was going on at that stable. That evening I brought up the idea with Sarah while we were cleaning up after dinner. Hey, so the guys and I were talking during golf today, I started casually. And we were thinking about maybe joining you and the girls at the stables one day, just to see what this whole horseback riding thing is about. What do you think? Sarah barely looked up from the dish she was drying, and I could see her expression shift slightly. Oh, I don't know, Jack, she said, sounding a little dismissive. I don't think you'd really enjoy it. It's just, well, it's a lot of time with the horses, learning techniques, cleaning tack and stuff. It's not exactly exciting. She gave a quick, almost forced smile. I mean, you've got your golf, right? That's your thing. I think you'd find this boring. I was a bit surprised by her quick brush off. Sarah's usually pretty open to us doing things together, so her hesitation felt a little odd. Are you sure? I mean, it might be fun to watch, see you in action. Maybe I'll even give it a try, I said, trying to keep it light. But she was quick to wave it off again. Trust me, Jack, it's not your kind of thing. It's really more for us, Just some time for me and the girls to unwind and have fun. That answer didn't quite sit right with me. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, like she really didn't want me there. But I didn't push it. All right, if you say so, I replied, trying not to sound too bothered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, though, and I started wondering if the other guys got the same response from their wives. Later that night, I decided to give Dave a call. Hey, did you ask Rachel about us going to the stables with them, I asked. He let out a short laugh. Yeah, I did. She shot that down so fast, I didn't even get a chance to explain why I wanted to go. She told me the same thing, that it wouldn't be interesting. And it's just girl time. I could hear the same confusion in his voice that I was feeling. Curious, I reached out to Mark next. His response was pretty much the same. Emma told me I'd be bored out of my mind. It's just them bonding with the horses, she said. But honestly, I got the feeling she didn't want me there either. We all got the same vague, dismissive responses. It was starting to feel like they were hiding something. And now, I was more curious than ever about what was really going on at that stable. A few weeks passed, and the thought of what the girls were really up to at the stables kept nagging at me. Every time Sarah would head out for her riding sessions, that dismissive tone from our last conversation replayed in my mind. It wasn't just me. Dave and Mark were feeling the same way. None of us could shake the weird feeling that something wasn't adding up. Our wives were all giving us the same excuse. It's boring. It's just girl time. We would enjoy it, but we weren't buying it anymore. One Saturday, as we gathered for our usual round of golf, the conversation naturally drifted back to the subject. All right, we've all been thinking the same thing, Dave said, setting down his club. What if we just show up? No warning, no asking for permission. We go to the stables and see for ourselves what's going on. Mark nodded in agreement, his expression a mix of curiosity and suspicion. I'm in. I mean, it's too weird, right? They all gave us the exact same excuse. What are the odds? We spent the next few holes debating whether or not it was a good idea, but the more we talked, What's the worst that could happen, I said. We show up, see a bunch of horses, and realize we were just overthinking this. Or, we find out what's really been keeping them there for hours, 4 days a week. Dave smirked, clearly liking the sound of that. Exactly. Let's just go. Worst case, we get a laugh out of it. By the end of the game, we had made a plan. The next time our wives headed to the stables, we'd follow them discreetly, of course, and see what was really going on. No more vague excuses, no more being left in the dark. We all agreed that something about their obsession with horseback riding didn't quite add up. Now we were determined to figure out what it was. The following week, we watched as our wives gathered their gear and headed out for another session. As soon as they were gone, the three of us met up, grabbed some coffee, and drove to the stable. We parked a little ways off so they wouldn't see us coming, trying to be as low-key as possible. It felt ridiculous, like we were in some kind of spy movie, but we couldn't help it. Our curiosity had reached a breaking point. As we approached the stable, the place seemed quiet, serene even. Horses were grazing in the nearby fields, and the smell of hay and leather filled the air. We could hear faint laughter in the distance, coming from the arena. All right, let's see what's so boring about this, Dave whispered as we made our way closer. None of us knew what to expect, but we were about to find out exactly what had been going on during all those horseback riding sessions. As we got closer to the arena, we could hear the laughter grow louder. At first, everything seemed normal, just the usual sounds of the horses and the occasional voice of a trainer. But as we rounded the corner and got a clear view of what was happening, we froze. What we saw made all three of us stand there, completely stunned. The women, our wives, were acting in a way I couldn't even begin to understand. They were half-dressed, moving around the horses in this strange, almost hyperactive way. There was an odd energy in the air, a mix of excitement and something else I couldn't quite place. It was unsettling, to say the least. They were laughing, touching the horses in ways that felt far too intimate, and recording it all on their phones. I exchanged a glance with Dave and Mark. None of us said a word, but the discomfort was clear on all our faces. Something about the whole scene just felt wrong. It wasn't just the fact that they were filming, it was how they were interacting with the animals. The way they were behaving didn't make any sense, and I could feel my stomach turning as I watched. Mark was the first to break the silence. "What the hell is this?" he muttered under his breath. His voice was low, but I could hear the anger in it. Dave shook his head, looking just as disturbed. "This isn't normal," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on the scene before us. "I don't know what's going on, but this isn't right." Then, Dave said something that hit all of us like a ton of bricks. Do you think something unnatural is happening here?" Between them and the horses, his words hung in the air, heavy and full of suspicion. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but the thought had already crossed my mind. I couldn't stay there any longer. The sight of Sarah, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, behaving like that was too much. The unease was quickly turning into anger, confusion, and disbelief. Whatever was happening here, I knew one thing for sure. It wasn't something I could just ignore. Without thinking, the three of us stormed into the arena. I could feel the anger boiling inside me, and I knew the other guys were feeling the same way. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. The women froze, their playful laughter stopping instantly as they realized we had seen everything. Sarah's face went pale, and the others looked just as startled, quickly trying to cover themselves up. Dave stepped forward, his voice filled with a mix of confusion and disgust. "Why are you filming this? What is this even for?" He gestured wildly at the scene before us, the cameras, the bizarre behavior. None of it made sense, and the more we looked at it, the worse it seemed. Mark stood beside him, his face twisted in disbelief. "You're not even going to try to explain this?" Sarah and the other women scrambled to speak, their words tumbling over each other in a panic. "It's not what you think," Sarah said quickly, her eyes wide with fear. It's just a project. We're filming for a creative thing we're working on. That's all. It's nothing inappropriate." Her voice wavered as she tried to make sense of her own excuses. The other women nodded frantically, all trying to chime in with similar explanations. But none of us were buying it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A project," I snapped, feeling my blood pressure rise. "You think I'm that stupid? You think this looks normal?" I pointed at the camera, the horses, the whole unsettling scene. "I don't care what you're trying to say. I'm not going to stand here and pretend this is okay." Mark, looking just as enraged, added, "This is insane. How could you think we wouldn't find out? How could you think this is something you could just explain away?" The desperation on their faces was clear, but it didn't matter. We had seen too much. Finally, I turned to Sarah, my voice ice cold. "I'm not going to live with a zoophile," I said flatly. The words came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't care. The trust was shattered. Without waiting for her response, I turned on my heel and walked out of the arena, leaving Sarah standing there in stunned silence. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. The image of Sarah and her friends with the horses, their behavior, their excuses, it all replayed in my head, and each time, it felt worse. I was seething, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. How had it come to this? How had the woman I loved become someone I could no longer trust? When I got home, I didn't waste any time. I marched straight to our bedroom and started gathering Sarah's things. Every piece of clothing, every personal item, anything that belonged to her, I packed up quickly and with a sense of grim determination. It wasn't a matter of wanting to hurt her. It was a matter of removing her presence from my life as quickly as possible. I had to do something, anything, to deal with the shock and betrayal I felt. As I filled boxes with her belongings, I couldn't help but think about everything that had led up to this moment. We had always been a team, or so I thought. Now it felt like the foundation of our entire relationship had been ripped out from under me. I was left with this overwhelming sense of confusion and betrayal. How had I missed the signs? How had things gone so wrong? With the boxes packed and ready, I headed outside and unceremoniously placed them on the front lawn. It was a cold, harsh move, but I was done with trying to be civil. It was clear to me now that I couldn't continue living with someone who had been so deceitful. I wanted to make sure there was no misunderstanding. Sarah's things were out in the open, as was my resolve to end things. Next, I grabbed a sign I had hastily made and nailed it to the front door. It read, "Zoophiles keep out." The words felt harsh, but they were a reflection of my current state of mind. I needed something to signify the end of this nightmare, a clear marker that would make it absolutely clear that this was over. As I stood there, looking at the mess I had made, I felt a pang of regret. I wondered how it had all gone so wrong, how a simple hobby had turned into something so dark and twisted. I shook my head, trying to push away the thoughts. For now, all I could do was focus on moving forward, despite the pain and confusion that lingered.